So hello, everybody.
Hello. Yeah, Chantal, it's a pleasure. It's my pleasure to speak with you tonight. It's 7 p.m. in Vienna. Toronto, it's 1 p.m. I know, I'm just coming from Canada, and I'm a little bit jet-lagged. Yeah, and it's quite nice for me to have you as, just arriving back and going back to Canada virtually for me. Yeah, I would like to
show you this. What's in my office? Do you see it?
Silence, pay attention, go home, pick up. What is the last one?
The pieces.
Who has? From
That's
whom?
what I'm doing.
From whom is it? Huh?
It's Vikrit Tiravanija.
I haven't seen it before. It's beautiful. So we go a little bit into detail about what you do in Toronto now. First, I would like to start by introducing for our audience and for our virtual online audience a little bit the context of what we are doing here. And again, thank you for agreeing to participate in our talk and lecture series developed for Kunsthalle Wien's current exhibition, Exposition Imaginaire. To begin with a short introduction for those of you here today that may not have tuned into the project before, and for all people who, following us online. The exhibition, Exposition Imaginaire, consists of an extensive series of talks and a film format screened within the exhibition space where I'm sitting at the very moment. The film is presented in the form of a cinematic collage, a mash-up of an eclectic range of material, clips of footage from films, television, talks, lectures, video works, book and poetry readings, intended to provide the visitor with an introduction to and reminder of the limits and possibilities of virtual exhibition experiences. The project deals with the digital present, the impact on the reception of art and the reception of exhibitions. It looks both to past and future ideas of the exhibition and what this means for society. It's exactly what you are doing in Toronto. How does an ever-increasing process of digitalization influence exhibition making, and how do exhibition venues deal with the tendency towards dematerialization? L'Exposition Imaginaire seeks to answer these questions through a number of talks, lectures, and discussions featuring artists, art historians, curators, architects, and scholars. This brings me nicely to introduce you as our guest today, Chantal Pombriand, an internationally very well-renowned curator and art critic. You started in 1975, is that right, with Parachute, the very famous Parachute magazine. You're from Montreal originally, and you have recently been appointed as the new CEO and artistic director of MOCA, not MOCA, the Museum of Contemporary Canadian Art in Toronto.
Contemporary art.
Contemporary art.
Yes, that's why we left out 1C. The board left out 1C from the name.
It was not your idea to call it like this?
Well, I made the recommendation that it should be formalized.
Okay. So we agreed. We just briefly talked on the phone a couple of minutes ago, and you said we need to do a little bit of speed dating today. You are just coming from another event, and you have to go and eat something later before you have to.
Lunchtime here.
Before you have to go to another meeting at 2 p.m. in Toronto. It means we have about 35 minutes. L'Exposition Imaginaire, the name of this exhibition derives from the famous imaginary museum that was invented by André Malraux in 1947, who gathered together photographs of sculpture from various different eras and cultures to create a museum without walls. Malraux anticipated a development that by now has become a matter of course. Today, the internet has taken on the task of making representations of artworks, videos, and virtual gallery visits available at all times and everywhere. It seems the physical presence of the artwork in a particular place is becoming increasingly less important in view of the global circulation of its manifold reproductions. Would you agree that this era now is the beginning of the end of the exhibition?
You know, I felt that the year 2000 was the beginning of the end of a civilization. And for many reasons, because I think by then we were feeling the impact of two major contemporary phenomena. One, of course, is globalization, and the other is information, and especially how it has evolved through the internet, the web, and the many devices that connect us to a larger world. So it's normal that... Are you hearing me properly? Because I hear a lot of echo.
I hear you.
Yes?
Yes.
It's not for the audience?
Yes.
Is it okay? Okay.
It's fine. Yeah.
So I think that the museum is bound to change, and exhibition making is already changing so much, you know. And I think what is changing a lot is that the idea of the live or liveness is becoming something that is at the forefront of exhibition making today. One of the artists that has had a huge success, as we know all, in the last 15 years is Tino Sehgal, presenting live events on a magnitude and in situations such as major museums around the world, where all that it's about is about live presence and live interaction. I think that's a big difference between the museum of yesterday and the museum of today and tomorrow. It's how we can enliven the space of the museum and how it can become more and more the coming together of liveliness, be it through our material bodies or through the interaction of bodies with objects or ideas. The museum is becoming more and more a space of sharing, I think, and a space of exchange and developing new forms of knowledge together, often forms of knowledge that have been ignored by visual culture in our, especially Western world, Western civilization. And I think now the digital world, paradoxically, is bringing about an exploration of new forms of being or forms of being that have been left out by Western civilization, such as touching, feeling, hearing, not just seeing. It's not anymore, the museum is not anymore the domain of, the royal domain of one type of perception, very rational perception, which is that of the eye.
It's interesting. That means for you the year 2000 or around 2000 is a new beginning.
Yes, I think it's the sort of landmark. It symbolizes a change. You know, change was coming about, I think, at the end of the 20th century, especially after the Second World War. And it brought about a new type of consciousness, and it brought about also new tools to the world. We know very well that the computer was invented in the context of the Second World War. It was a military device. It was an intelligence device in the first place. Well, happily, it's turned into something else by now, which is really transforming this world and the way that we relate to each other as human beings, and the way that we relate to history and to knowledge production.
But we are already a step further. There is artificial intelligence now generated.
Yes, that's very scary.
That's interesting. Why do you find it scary?
Well, I've been told by engineers that are and philosophers that are specialists of that field that there's nothing to be scared about, because the human mind will always be more complex and will always find a way to figure out what these machines cannot figure out.
Yeah,
You know?
I had a similar conversation a couple of days ago during a jury meeting I had in Halifax, where we talked a lot about John Refman, the Montreal-based superstar, John Refman, who is really a child of the, if we may say so, of the digital age, and he is really also playing with artificial intelligence and how this what it generates for himself, for his artistic production, but also for the various audiences he is addressing. And indeed, artificial intelligence will always be controlled by humans. So
well, I recently read an article, and I found it quite interesting, that artificial intelligence now can generate choreography. Through video, it can observe the way a group moves, and it can create a choreography using that information and organizing it according to a certain choreographic language that it can be fed or that it can invent itself. But how surprising can that be, you know? And I'm sure that choreographers will always find a way to go beyond what the machine can do. As interesting, it becomes a tool at a certain point and a way of thinking further. And this is the only thing about machines, is that they help us, our minds go beyond what they are capable of doing. Even though we have a great philosopher, in this country called Marshall McLuhan, for whom the medium was the message. But a message is something that you interpret. It's only a message if you read the message and if you talk about the message. Therefore, it's never, whatever happens is never limited to the medium or to the machine.
But, you mentioned Tino Sehgal, I mentioned John Refman. Those artists are both on the very forefront on exhibition making. They don't necessarily need a curator, but do they need museums?
I'll stop you with they don't necessarily need a curator.
It was very provocative, of course.
Yeah, I could gather that. I think, the only way that artists or anyone in this world fulfills his or her potential is by interacting with others. And I don't know an artist who solely works for himself or by himself. So I think that is essentially the curator's role, to work out a situation with artists. And that encounter can happen on many levels, be it just talking about the physical space to which the artist is invited to work in. It's very often the first contact comes with the curator, and the idea is that the curator, just the words that the curator uses to talk about that space can already nourish the imagination of the artist. So and the curator is not only the person who's, position in life as being a curator. Curator can be your 5-year-old daughter or your 85-year-old grandmother, We're all curators, each and every one of each other. So that's my position about what is curating about and what is the relation between artists and curating. For the museum, I think it's... why would artists need museums today? Because there's so many opportunities to do work, even in public spaces. You can even just put your work on internet if you want. I think the museum is essentially a space of encounter, a space where you have the chance to work out the opportunity to work out ideas with the team working in the museum or with the visitors or public of the museum. And it's a learning opportunity. It's a learning opportunity that works on either side. It works for the artists, it works for the visitors, it works for people in the team of the museum. The Roman, etymology of the word museum is to be, first of all, a place for muses. That essentially is a place for inspiration and a place for sharing ideas. That's the basic idea of the museum. And I think that we have to come back to those roots when we think about the contemporary museum, because that's where it can be the most forceful when it plays out its role in that way.
Are you talking already about the concepts and the concept about your new museum now?
Oh, very much. Huh? No, but in general, I first started working in a museum a long time ago at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, and I was hired there to do public programs. It was a new program that I was setting up, and it was to be done on the occasion of the reopening of the museum, which had been closed for 3 years. And they hired me because I was already doing tons of things in Montreal that they had noticed, and they said, oh, she might be the one that might, make the public come back and everything. But they were sort of surprised because instead of proposing programs that would enhance the exhibitions, I started working with the new forms of, that was in the 70s already, the new forms of art that were characterizing the 70s, like video, performance, installation, talks also. It was the years when we were bringing in theoretical debate in the museum. It didn't exist before. So I brought all of that in, and because at that time,
you're breaking up. Hello?
Yes?
Yes. Now it's okay.
The museum is essentially a place for sharing and exchange. It's a laboratory of ideas, and it's a laboratory for living together. So this is what the new museum will be about very much.
I don't want to be anecdotal now, but it's out of curiosity. Was the audience more experimental in the 1970s than now?
No, I would just say no. I find the public for contemporary art is growing. We know that from the facts. We know that every time there's a document they have more public, that museums of contemporary art are burgeoning all over the world, and they are attracting sometimes greater publics than they ever imagined. Contemporary art is important to the contemporary world and the people living in it because it talks about them, it talks about us, and it talks about us in a very different way than what we see on television, let's say, or at what we read in books, because it's a direct experience. It's an experience that we can share in the immediate with others that are right there beside us in the same space. That's what is the extraordinary beauty of, I think, the museum today. It is the space to hang out where you will share emotions, share ideas, and eventually develop projects. And that will be a dimension that we will be developing also, trying to develop projects with our visitors, be they the most interesting artists we can find, or people off the street that have good ideas. Why not?
Could you be a little bit more specific about your new museum, which will open in 2017?
Well, it's going to open on 158 Sterling Road in Toronto.
Yes. Yeah, for all of you who haven't been there, this is definitely not in the city center of the recent Toronto. It used to be kind of a no-go area even, okay, this is now, it will be a gentrification project as well, yeah, but not talking about the venue itself. I'm more interested about the soft skills you want to develop there, and what it says. Or you start you take 2000 as the starting point also for your collection, which is completely new. I don't know about any other museum in the Western Hemisphere taking 2000 as a starting point for building a new collection. But tell us a little bit more about your ideas and the ideas about your team and the ideas about why does Toronto need this kind of museum?
Oh, there's so many questions in that statement, what you just said. I'll start by the last one. Why a new museum in Toronto now? Well, Toronto is becoming a new city compared to what it was even in the 80s. It's grown from a population of 2 million to, it will grow to 10 million very soon in 2040. That's a huge expansion population-wise for a city in the context of North America. We've seen that happen in China, of course, in Africa, but not in North America. It's a really unique development, but it's also happening, the second point, it's also happening with people that have come recently from 200 different countries in the world. So I call it the new world. In Canada, at the 16th century, we were referring to it as the New World. And the French and the British came and discovering the New World. Well, I think now the whole world is discovering a new world here in Toronto, which is becoming a global metropolis. And you feel the energy. It's very different energy, let's say, other metropolis such as New York, which is a metropolis that dates from the beginning of the 20th century. It's a metropolis of the 21st century. And that coexistence of people from 200 countries in the world is relatively non-violent compared to the US or to what's happening in Europe or other places in the world right now. So it leaves more room for developing new cultural mergers. We know that culture is made from hybridity. It's made from people from different cultures coming together. So here it is happening with an intensity that is quite unique in this space and time. And it will be interesting to see what comes out of it. So I'm very, sort of motivated by this idea, how to create a museum for these people, which on the one hand can be very sophisticated. You know that in Canada we have some of the best art schools in the world since many years. Every year there's thousands of graduates that come out of those art schools that are excellent artists. But now the new generation often comes from, has roots from different places in the world. And this is quite interesting to observe what is coming out of that. And at the same time, what is being also, acknowledged is that we have extraordinary artists coming from indigenous background in Canada. So it's work together.
Can you repeat this? I think you need to. Can you start only the last question, the last sentence again? You were breaking up.
Yes, I was saying that we have this new generation of artists that comes out of immigration. We know Canada has 20.4% immigration. It's a larger percentage in all of the G8 countries. US, for example, has only 12%. France, Germany, UK, they have 7-8%. So we have this, and there's a lot of artists coming out of this new cultural mixity, but at the same time, there's a new generation of artists coming out of the indigenous culture in Canada, which is brilliant also, So it's a very polyphonic world art situation here that we are developing. So the museum will be an echo of that. And I think that we can also, the way we will be working, you mentioned that our collection will be mostly post-2000. That's because we want a process-oriented collection, but also a process-oriented museum. Therefore, we are not looking necessarily, if you look back 50 years ago, museums would only exhibit what had already been produced in artist studios or what they found in galleries or auctions. We will look at the world from the other side of the telescope and try to be in a working and in a process-oriented relationship with artists and with the public also.
Does a museum in Toronto needs a department of diversity?
No.
No. Okay.
We're not looking for us, it's a fait accompli. Oui. It's something that's there, it exists, we're working with it. We don't need rules and regulations to tell us how many women, how many men, how many transgender, how many, people from the French origin, whatever.
I totally agree with you, but someone like me, but also you and you, we know about those discussions, especially when you are in a jury for selecting new students for a university or for any other jury program, that quite often we have to look into diversity. How many women, how many indigenous, how many second-generation migrants, third-generation migrants should be represented in the whole mix. I find it also very complicated. and it's not mirroring necessarily the reality. It sounds very challenging endeavor what you are going to do there, and we are all looking very much forward to the opening next year. But again, it's a museum. You will collect. Which kind of forms of art will you buy?
Oh, there again, there's no prescription. It will be something that will be worked out as we go, and you know, we're coming to a point that's very interesting for me: the question of performance. I've been involved with performance
from the very beginning.
Very, very long. For me, it's been something very central and a very important phenomenon. And the first text that I wrote about performance at the end of the 70s, right away, I could see that it was not a new genre to be added to sculpture, painting, photography, whatever. You know, I saw it most as something that was in between different kinds of medium and art making. And I still believe that very much. And essentially, performance is about going through form. Per is the Latin word for going through. So I see it more that way. Developing our collection will be going through forms, walking through forms, and seeing how they're assembled in different ways. Because you know, and I know so many artists today that don't work in one form anymore. You know, they go from painting, performance, installation. They work in situ with people. Even painters now get involved in workshop situations that are part of their work, as much as the canvases can be part of their work. So I think we have to recognize that.
That means you look into the vertical and not necessarily only into the art market.
No, not at all at the art market. The idea is really to have a working relationship with artists, and then whatever piece they produce, on occasion, be able to acquire it for the collection.
One proposal of the MoCA includes the plan of, and now I quote you, the plan to base much of its work on developing a digital archive of relevance to contemporary art, artists and art lovers alike. Why do you believe that this is necessary?
Because the digital is so much part of our world. Each and every one of us as individuals, we live with the digital from morning to night. We don't live only with objects around us. So I think a museum should live the same way and work with that environment, just as we've learned to work with it in our everyday existence. I can't answer the question as to what that desire to work that way will produce, but I think it will be a sort of presence, using the digital presence as a tool, a way of exploring and a way of working, just as we do naturally in the everyday life. So we will certainly be with artists, but also with visitors, which I call activators, by the way, not visitors. It will be a constant investigation on how we can work with this wider world, this expanded world, which has become the world of the web, and which is interconnected with our material, physical world in a very, very close way nowadays. Again, we come to Marshall McLuhan with his idea that medium is the message. I often say the medium is the massage. You know, it's really in our bodies.
Naja, you are French speaking, no? So message and massage. But you know, the visiting or being in Toronto quite a lot, it's easy there to recognize that this city is in a way twofold. In winter and in summer days, it's completely two different kinds of cities. Mm-hmm. The public space in winter, it's mainly made up by commercial areas in winter. And in summer, it's a completely different city to me. So it's people cruise and browse around everywhere. But it's short in public space. It's almost it's a cliche, but our museums are the new public spaces for the city.
Yes.
Yeah?
They are.
They are. Yeah?
Very much so. That's why I always speak of the idea of the agora, you know, that you will not only come to this museum to visit exhibitions and go out an hour later, you will come to spend whatever time you want to spend there, and we will create the conditions for you to feel comfortable in that space and to stay there maybe 6 hours if you want to meet someone there. If you want to work there, you know, we'll provide a whole area with tables and chairs. We'll provide computers. You can bring your computer, your iPad, whatever. You can do some couch surfing. We'll have tons of couches to offer. And you can even start projects there if you want, and start research there on what I call the fourth floor, which is called the squat. We will have researcher programmers that can accompany you to develop projects that eventually can be transformed into projects for the museum or with the museum, such as a series of talks or just a series of workshops or maybe an exhibition in a project space, or maybe just a virtual exhibition on the web. And this should be able to happen as much with high-profile artists as with someone who has an idea coming off the street. So that's what I mean by the visitor being an activator. And we know, of course, that with since art, much of contemporary art has to do with installation making, that there's a lot of interactive installation happening inside of exhibitions. So whether it wants it or not, the Museum of the Future will be live. It will be all live.
I think you should invent also a rest place. Maybe a couple of hotel rooms should be integrated.
Yes, that's the second building if ever we get there.
Yeah, but I think it should be integrated. Huh? So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now we talked for over 40 minutes. Chantal.
Fantastic. It was very enjoyable.
I like your spirit, and I'm pretty sure it will be a big success and a model for tomorrow's museums. And I'm very much looking forward to visit, not only the opening. We will see us before.
Not only you, I hope the people that are there with you today.
Yes. So I will greet them, and we definitely will have a conversation about you now, where we hang up. Thank you very much, and have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.